all left me to die. So, if you don't mind, I think I'll side with the literal demon. Hell hath a wicked grin, a revenge romance. Chapter 1. The Abandoned Labyrinth. The old Hawthorne mansion was a ruin, a Gothic monument swallowed by rust and ivy. It was the perfect stage for the kind of drunken, daredevil spectacle they loved. Except, tonight, the spectacle was me. My name is 𝖉𝖊𝖒𝖔𝖓, or rather, it was 𝖉𝖊𝖒𝖔𝖓. I was the fool who mistook glittering teeth for friendship and seductive whispers for love. Alice, come on, just past the billiards room. They said there's a sub-level. Peter, my boyfriend of 2 years, called out, his voice a little too eager, a little too strained. He held the flashlight, illuminating Eleanor Sinclair's perfectly manicured hand resting possessively on his shoulder. Eleanor, my childhood best friend, heiress to the Sinclair media empire, and the one person I had always defended against the world's judgment. There were 5 of them total, my core circle. Peter, Eleanor, Tommy, the investor, Gwen, the stylist, and Victor, the smug scholar. 5 people I would have died for. They led me down crumbling stone steps, past cobwebs that felt strangely heavy, into an airless space smelling of mold and forgotten history. The switch was thrown with brutal speed. A sharp, searing pain exploded in my side. I gasped, stumbling against the rough stone wall, the cool metal of a blade twisting deep inside me. What? I looked down. The scarlet tide soaking my silk dress looked alien, impossible. Peter stood over me, not with the charming smirk I knew, but a cold, calculating mask. We needed the 𝖉𝖊𝖒𝖔𝖓 shares, Alice. Eleanor was tired of being almost the richest. Eleanor stepped forward, her expensive boots clicking softly on the damp floor. Her usually sweet, doll-like face was contorted into a mask of pure, ugly resentment. Did you really think I liked being your shadow, Alice? Always the poor little rich girl who had to be kind to the real star. She laughed, a brittle, high-pitched sound. No more. You die here. Everyone thinks you ran off on a whim. Peter gets your trust fund, I get the company merger. Win-win. The others stood in the shadows, their silence an acceptance, their lack of concern a second, deeper wound. Betrayal didn't just hurt, it was a physical force, pinning me to the floor. They locked the heavy, iron-bound door. The rasp of the rusted bolt was the last sound of the living world I heard. I sank to the floor, my breath coming in ragged, shallow sobs. The wound was mortal, I knew it. The darkness was absolute, pressing in on me, promising a slow, cold end. No, I will not die like this. In the deepest corner, near where a support column met the bedrock, my hand brushed against something smooth, unlike the rough stone. It was a shallow depression, and within it, a cold, polished object. A small, hexagonal obsidian slab, covered in carvings that hummed faintly beneath my fingertips. In a last, desperate act of defiance, I closed my fist around it and squeezed. Chapter 2. The Gift of Damnation. A flash of light, not the weak beam of a dying flashlight, but a blinding, sulphurous violet erupted from the slab. The air thickened, turning hot and suffocating, yet strangely clean. The sound that followed was less a noise and more a seismic shift in reality. It was a voice that whispered in my bones, not my ears, deep and resonant, like marble grinding against diamond. Ah, freedom, and a dying vessel. I craned my neck, trying to see through the fading light of my consciousness. The figure that materialized was impossible. He was leaning against the stone pillar, entirely at ease, as if waiting for a late appointment. He was tall, impossibly graceful, and devastatingly beautiful in a way that defied human anatomy. His hair was a cascade of midnight silk, his eyes the color of molten gold, flickering with amused malice. He wore only loose, dark trousers, exposing a torso carved from marble and shadow, covered in intricate, moving runes that pulsed with the violet light of his arrival. The popular media had been very, very wrong. You, I managed, blood bubbling past my lips. You're a demon. He tilted his head, a smile predatory and perfect curving his mouth. The current designation is Azazel, Archduke of the 𝖉𝖊𝖒𝖔𝖓. But to you, dying child, I am merely service. He drifted towards me, his feet not quite touching the ground. He knelt, his golden gaze fixed on mine, completely unconcerned by the blood soaking my clothes. A terrible trade has been made this night. You, a soul of remarkable spite, were betrayed. I, a being of vast power, was imprisoned by a trinket. He ran a cool finger along the line of my jaw. I require a mistress, you require salvation, and I believe vengeance. The word vengeance resonated deeper than the pain. It was a promise, a sweet, dark wine. My soul! I whispered, fighting the rapidly approaching darkness. If you save me and serve me, it's yours. For eternity. Azazel's smile widened, showing teeth that were sharp, though not in a monstrous way, more like a perfectly crafted predator's. Such magnificent collateral for such a petty desire, I accept. He didn't touch the wound. Instead, he placed his palm over my heart. A cold fire spread through my chest, chasing the blood back into my veins. The agonizing pressure in my side vanished. My ragged breathing smoothed, the heavy scent of blood simply lifted. When he removed his hand, I sat up, completely whole. The tear in the silk dress remained, but the skin beneath was pristine, unmarked, and humming with a strange, dark vitality. You are restored, Azazel said, rising in a fluid, inhuman motion. He was already bare torso again, the glowing runes on his skin dimming to a faint silver tracery. Your life is mine to command, and my power is yours to wield. I am your obedient weapon, your shadow, your loving, malleable pet. He knelt again, this time resting his forehead against my knee, a gesture of absolute, terrifying submission. Tell me, mistress, who dies first? A cold, beautiful calm settled over me, replacing the panic and the grief. I no longer saw Peter's face, or Eleanor's. I only saw the list of 5 names and the theme that connected them all. They will pay, I stated, my voice steady, unfamiliar, and cold. Every single one of them. And Azazel, my love, we will start with the lowest of their natures. I remembered Peter, the constant, hungry look in his eyes when he spoke of other women, other deals, other forbidden thrills. We start, I declared, standing up and gazing into the darkness where the iron door stood locked, with lust. Chapter 3. Lust. The boyfriend. I emerged from the mansion 2 hours later, wearing Azazel's borrowed, impossibly tailored dark coat over my tattered dress. Azazel walked 2 paces behind me, a study in silent, lethal devotion, his golden eyes scanning the empty streets. Peter is celebrating, Azazel reported, his voice a low, melodic purr. He has already accessed the preliminary funds. He is at the Black Heart Club, drowning in cheap champagne and cheaper company. Cheap champagne and cheap company, I echoed. A genuine smile, the first true, non-fake smile in years curving my lips. How fitting. The sin. Lust. Peter's betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about his inability to be satisfied with one thing, one woman, one deal, one life. He was driven by insatiable, shallow desire. We found him in a private booth, already surrounded by 3 overly made-up women and a pile of newly purchased, gaudy watches. I stepped into the light. The room went silent. Peter's jaw dropped. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, which, in a way, he had. Alice, how are you? Alive? I finished for him, my voice silk smooth and dangerous. A little disappointment, darling? Azazel stepped out of the shadows. Even fully clothed in a simple black shirt, he radiated an impossible glamour that made every other man in the room look like poorly rendered sketches. My master has a gift for you, Peter, Azazel announced, his voice carrying the authority of a king. Peter tried to pull out his phone. Azazel merely looked at the device, and the screen shattered into a million non-existent pieces. Your sin is desire without fulfillment, Peter. The endless chase. My gift is to make that chase absolute. Azazel did not need complicated rituals. He only needed intent. He flicked his wrist. Peter screamed, not in physical pain, but in sheer mental overload. He began frantically clawing at his designer clothes, tearing them open, his eyes wide and unfocused, fixed on an invisible point of irresistible temptation. He scrambled out of the booth and started making desperate, public advances towards everyone, the bartender, the bouncer, even the bewildered busboy. His desire was no longer controllable. It was a hungry, overriding imperative that stripped him of dignity, reason, and sanity. He was a creature of pure, overwhelming lust, eternally unsatisfied, and completely incapable of functioning in human society. As the club staff dragged him out, babbling incoherent pleas, I felt nothing but a cool sense of completion. "He is ruined, mistress," Azazel said, adjusting the lapel of his jacket. "Satisfactory," I replied. "Now, let's move on." The Glutton. Chapter 4. Gluttony. The Investor. Tommy Sterling was a successful venture capitalist, known for his relentless acquisition of companies and food. He didn't just invest, he devoured. He didn't just eat, he gorged. His ambition was a bottomless pit. The sin, gluttony. His betrayal was driven by the desire to consume more of the 𝖉𝖊𝖒𝖔𝖓 shares than Peter or Eleanor, securing a monopoly on the merger. We located Tommy at his favorite high-end steakhouse, where he was attempting to impress a potential client by ordering enough food for a small army. We approached his table. Tommy, unlike Peter, had been smart enough to be terrified and had security. "Get out!" Tommy bellowed, his face greasy with fear and butter. "Call the police! She's dead! She's a ghost!" "I am simply hungry, Tommy," I said sweetly, "and you, glutton, have always wanted more than you could stomach." Azazel stepped up, his expression a mixture of profound boredom and faint disgust. He wore a crisp, white silk shirt today, its collar open just enough to hint at the sculpted power beneath. "Gluttony is simple," Azazel said. "The perpetual hunger. I shall merely ensure the master's desires are granted eternally, with zero satiation." He reached out, not physically, but with a ripple in the air itself, and touched the glass of vintage red wine Tommy was holding. He simply looked down at the food on his plate, the mountains of steak, the rich sauces, the decadent desserts, and his eyes went blank with craving. He began to eat. Not in a civilized manner, but savagely, stuffing huge handfuls of food into his mouth, his eyes welling with tears, not of joy, but of desperate, agonizing need. The client watched in horror as Tommy consumed everything on the table, raw, cooked, savory, sweet, until he was choking, gagging, and yet still reaching for more. His body began to distend rapidly, bloating unnaturally. Yet his compulsion to eat only grew stronger. His hunger became a physical, painful force, driving him to consume inedible objects off the table and floor, his sanity dissolving into a singular, agonizing, consuming urge. He will spend the rest of his short life trying to fill an abyss that cannot be filled, Azazel explained to me calmly, while the restaurant staff shrieked and scattered. A perfectly proportionate punishment. Ensure his accounts are frozen and his assets are put into an endless legal loop for his medical care, I instructed. I want him destitute, physically ruined, and spiritually starved. "As you command, my lady," Azazel murmured, and with another flick of his hand, the legal groundwork for Tommy's financial collapse was laid, invisible but final. Chapter 5. Greed, the Stylist. Gwen Sinclair, no relation to Eleanor, but a friend who desperately wished she was my personal stylist. She was obsessed with luxury, status, and the endless accumulation of expensive things. Her betrayal was rooted in the promise of a massive payout that would secure her permanent financial superiority. The sin, greed. She coveted wealth, believing that money was the sole measure of a person's worth and safety. Gwen was at a celebrity auction, bidding aggressively on a historic diamond necklace. She was radiant, confident in the massive deposit Eleanor had given her for her silence. I watched her from the balcony, Azazel standing beside me, looking like a demigod who had just strolled off Olympus. Tonight, he had chosen a simple black turtleneck and the same breathtakingly arrogant expression. Gwen believes material possessions are the only reality, I noted. Let us introduce her to an attractive illusion. An entertaining diversion, Azazel agreed, his golden eyes sparkling with mischief. As Gwen made the winning bid, a staggering $5 million, Azazel acted. He simply whispered a single, resonant word in the air, a word that only Gwen and I could hear. Suddenly, a massive, antique emerald larger and more brilliant than the necklace appeared, shimmering in an empty glass case across the room. It radiated an unnatural light, pulling the eye. Gwen stopped smiling, her attention fixated on the new gem. Her eyes glazed over, her breath hitching. The diamond necklace in her hand instantly looked dull, insignificant. She dropped the necklace and rushed toward the new case, frantic to claim the superior gem. As she reached it, the emerald vanished, but instantly, a flawless ruby, twice the size, appeared on the main stage. And when she chased that, an enormous, perfect sapphire appeared on the ceiling. Azazel had trapped her in a cycle of endless covetous pursuit. He had granted her the ability to see the next best thing, the most valuable, the most unattainable treasure, but always just out of reach, always replacing what she had just won with something infinitely more desirable. Gwen's beautiful face dissolved into a mask of pure, maddening frustration. She began screaming, throwing chairs, attempting to smash through walls to reach the shimmering, fleeting phantoms of ultimate wealth. She was dragged away, clutching phantom jewels, screaming about the trillion-carat diamond she just missed. She is now a pauper with the sight of a queen, Azazel observed, satisfied. She will sell everything she owns trying to fund the chase for objects that only she can perceive. I smiled. The revenge was becoming intoxicating. Chapter 6. Sloth, the Scholar. Alex Sinclair, Eleanor's distant cousin, involved only for the promise of a quiet life of luxury, was a noted scholar, an academic genius crippled by terminal apathy. He was lazy, believing his intelligence meant he didn't need to exert himself. His participation in the betrayal was fueled by the promise of enough money to retire early and do absolutely nothing. The sin. Sloth. He sought absolute rest, absolute freedom from effort and despised activity. We found Alex in his massive, dimly lit library, already enjoying his retirement. He was half asleep in a leather chair, surrounded by priceless books he no longer bothered to read. When he saw me, he merely sighed, a look of profound annoyance crossing his features. Honestly, Alice, you couldn't have just stayed dead? This is such an effort. Your wish is my command, Alex, I said, standing before his desk. You wish for life without effort. I shall grant you the inverse. Azazel stepped forward, radiating a cold energy that seemed to speed up the surrounding air. He spoke directly to Alex, his golden eyes narrowed in contempt. The master finds your lack of ambition offensive, Sloth. I shall bind you to a task so immense, so unending, that your soul will crave oblivion, yet your body will never fail. With a casual snap of his fingers, Azazel didn't curse Alex. He cursed the library. Suddenly, a book floated off a shelf. It opened, its pages blank, and a complex equation, impossible geometry began to scribble itself across the page. Alex stood up, his face pale. What is that? It is a problem, Azazel explained. A paradox of impossible dimensions. It requires a solution, and you, Alex, are the only one capable of solving it. The task was to solve the equation. The curse was that the moment he found the final solution, the equation would subtly alter, rewriting the paradox to be even more complex, even more demanding, creating an endless, shifting intellectual maze. Alex's body was instantly seized by manic energy. The apathy vanished, replaced by a desperate, terrifying drive. He seized a pen, his eyes fixed on the floating book, and began scribbling furiously on every surface available, muttering about angles and non-Euclidean space. He would spend the rest of his days energetic, alert, and driven in an endless, torturous race against an infinitely moving finish line, forced to exert his vast intellect until he burned out, only to find the task reset. He will never rest, never be satisfied, never complete the one thing his mind demands, Azazel concluded, watching Alex frantically tear pages out of rare texts to use as scrap paper. Excellent. His punishment is perpetual motion, I agreed. Now, the minor players are dealt with. We accelerate. I want the instigators, the ones who stood by when Eleanor delivered the final blow. Chapter 7, Wrath and Pride, the final pawns. We grouped the last two minor conspirators, Maria and Victor, into a swift, simultaneous destruction. Maria, a volatile socialite with an explosive temper, was the embodiment of wrath. Victor, the smug, academic elitist, was the very definition of pride. They stood by because they craved Eleanor's approval and feared my influence, less than they craved revenge against anyone who slighted them, Maria, or who they deemed intellectually inferior. We decided to strike during a major corporate gala, the perfect stage for a public spectacle. Maria was sipping champagne, already looking agitated. Victor was lecturing a board member on the economic failings of his company. Maria's anger consumes her. Victor's arrogance blinds him. I told Azazel, use his power to shatter her control, and then use her collapse to destroy his perfect image. Azazel nodded, his expression focused. He was wearing an open-collared black shirt, and the air around him seemed to crackle with contained power, ready to be unleashed at my will. Azazel sent a slow, insidious wave of psychic noise toward Maria, twisting every ambient sound, a burst of laughter, a clink of glass, a whispered criticism into a magnified, personal insult aimed directly at her. Maria's control snapped. Her face turned crimson. She screamed, a ragged, piercing sound, and began violently attacking the nearest person, convinced they had just insulted her mother. She then turned her fury on the crystal sculptures, throwing objects and raging against invisible, constant slights. She was a public, violent menace, forever trapped in a world where every sound was a challenge to Duel. As the security staff rushed to contain the frantic, screaming Maria, Victor, disgusted, tried to step away, intent on maintaining his superior composure. Azazel then focused on Victor. Every piece of knowledge Victor had ever relied upon, every academic citation, every stock market statistic, every quote, every historical date, fled his mind. He was left with an empty, panicked void where his vast intellect once resided. When the CEO asked him to summarize his earlier lecture, Victor opened his mouth, and nothing came out but garbled nonsense, a stuttering mess of half-facts and invented words. He became a babbling idiot, unable to articulate a single coherent thought, his perfect, proud image shattered into 1,000 pieces of incompetent humiliation. I watched Victor flee the ballroom, his pride annihilated, his self-worth destroyed by a total, irreversible lack of knowledge. "They are gone," I said, looking at the chaos we had caused. Peter, Tommy, Gwen, Alex, Maria, Victor, all consumed by their own essential weakness. Azazel appeared at my elbow, leaning in close, his breath warm on my neck. "We are left with the true enemy, my lady. The mastermind, the architect of your pain." "Eleanor Sinclair," I breathed, a cold thrill running through me. The best friend who coveted my life. The one defined by envy. Chapter 8. Envy. The heiress. Eleanor was holed up in her penthouse, surrounded by her security detail, increasingly panicked by the rapid, unbelievable downfall of her accomplices. She knew I was alive, and she knew I was responsible. I stood on the adjacent skyscraper's edge, the wind whipping my coat around my legs. Azazel was beside me, his skin glowing faintly in the moonlight, his presence a palpable force of raw power. "She is paralyzed by fear," Azazel noted, a poor substitute for the power she so envied. "Her envy was her sickness," I stated. "She already had everything, but she coveted what was mine. My simple family name, my quiet resilience, my fiancé even if he was a pig. We will strip her of everything, then destroy the source of her power. Eleanor is a coward," I continued. "She wouldn't dare face me without an advantage. Indeed, Azazel chuckled. A dry, melodic sound. And she has secured one. It seems my reputation preceded me, and she sought consultation from a colleague. A colleague? Azazel tilted his head toward the penthouse. Another demon, and judging by the crude stabilizing wards surrounding the building, one with entirely too much pride and bad taste. Get ready, mistress, this becomes a competitive sport. Chapter 9. The Second Contract. We bypassed the extensive security with such ease it was almost an insult. We phased through the walls and appeared directly in Eleanor's opulent, white and gold living room. Eleanor gasped, stumbling back against a massive marble table. She wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a man who looked like Azazel's dark mirror image. He was equally handsome, but where Azazel was all sleek midnight and molten gold, this man was razor-sharp silver and cold, glacial blue. He was also bare torso, showing off a lean, muscled physique and runic tattoos that seemed to reject the light. Azazel, the silver demon sneered, a sound of utter contempt. Still crawling out of cheap trinkets, I see, and serving a child with a superficial vendetta. Pathetic. Azazel stepped forward, his eyes flashing dangerous gold. Belial, the Prince of Lies, still specializing in empowering spoiled mediocrity? I see you haven't raised your standards since the Black Plague. The air crackled between them. Eleanor recovered her nerve, clutching Belial's arm. You're too late, Alice. Belial has bound himself to me. He says he's much more powerful than your pet. He will give me everything you have, and then some. He's bound to envy, I scoffed. A sickness, not a desire. It will always turn on the host. And you are bound to a soul, Belial countered, his voice a cold whisper. A poor exchange rate, Azazel. I merely took her fear and promised her yours. Enough posturing, I snapped. I was done talking. Azazel, finish this. Immediately. With pleasure, my lady, Azazel purred, his absolute submission a sharp contrast to Belial's haughty independence. Chapter 10. The Demon's Battle. The ensuing battle was not a physical clash of fists, but a cataclysm of pure, dark energy. Azazel was faster. He moved not as a man, but as a flicker of shadow, weaving arcane energy into solid purple-black whips that lashed out. Belial, relying on raw, brute force, created shimmering shields of blue-white light and fired bolts of compressed dread. The penthouse was torn apart in seconds. Marble cracked, windows exploded, and the air filled with the scent of ozone and burning silk. Azazel fought with calculated cruelty, using the environment against Belial, driving him into corners, forcing his defenses to weaken. Belial, fueled by Eleanor's screaming desire to possess Azazel's power and my life, fought back with desperate ferocity. Eleanor watched, her face white with terror, clinging to the hope that her demon was truly superior. You've grown soft, Azazel, Belial roared, deflecting a shadow spike. Serving a mortal, you a Duke of the 8th. I am loved. Azazel shot back, his voice resonating with genuine possessiveness. A feeling you, Belial, could never comprehend. With a final, terrible surge of power, Azazel unleashed a torrent of concentrated shadow that hit Belial's shield. The shield shattered like glass. The shadow consumed Belial, pressing him against the wall until the cold, silver demon was screaming a sound far more human and terrifying than any of his victims. Eleanor, witnessing her last hope melt away, collapsed into hysterics. Kill her, Azazel, I commanded, the ultimate final desire rising in my throat. Azazel hesitated for only a fraction of a second, his golden gaze fixed on his captive opponent. With pleasure, mistress. This debt is owed. Chapter 11. The Ultimate Curse. Belial was already fading, his silver runes smoking and dissolving. But even in his final moments, the Prince of Lies had one last, desperate trick. His eyes, once cold blue, flared with a manic, triumphant malice. He didn't speak to Azazel. He spoke to me, Alice. You win, little mortal, but Azazel will never have his prize. With his last ounce of power, Belial bypassed Azazel's protection and thrust a final, blinding spike of energy directly into my chest, the exact location of my heart. where Azazel's power resided. Azazel shrieked, a sound of pure, primordial rage. But it was too late. The energy was a curse of absolute permanence. It didn't kill me, it made me unkillable. The wound healed instantly, but the air around me now shimmered with a constant, subtle, dark defiance against death, age, and entropy. Belial's form dissolved into dust, leaving behind only the echo of his insane laughter. Azazel rushed to me, his hands shaking as he gripped my shoulders. "Mistress, are you harmed?" "I'm fine," I whispered, realizing the depth of Belial's spite. I was immortal. My soul, which Azazel had signed for, would never ripen, never wither, never reach the point of collection. He had won a life and lost an eternity. Azazel understood instantly. He slumped, his perfect form suddenly radiating defeat and fury. That despicable, petty idiot! Azazel thundered, striking the marble floor and cracking it instantly. "He has condemned me. Your soul, my lady, can never be taken. You will never die. I am bound to serve you. Forever. With no payment, no reward, no end." He looked up at me, his golden eyes blazing with trapped despair. "Your soul is now an unattainable horizon. My contract is an infinite servitude." I watched him, my vengeance complete, my heart strangely calm. I had sacrificed my soul, but in return I had gained perfect vengeance, absolute devotion, and now endless life. I reached down and gently placed a hand on his cheek, feeling the silk of his skin and the heat of his anger. He was the most beautiful, most powerful, most utterly devoted creature in existence. And he was mine, forever. "You're right, Azazel," I said, a playful, soft smile returning to my lips. "You will never get my soul. Not this way." His anger faded, replaced by baffled confusion. "Then what? What is left? I am bound. I cannot leave your service until the debt is paid." I took a deep breath, looking around the ruined penthouse, at the wreckage of Eleanor Sinclair's envied life, and at the trapped, magnificent creature kneeling before me. I extended my hand, palm up towards him. "I can't give you my soul, my Archduke," I said, my voice warm with genuine affection and mischief. "But I can give you the next best thing." Azazel looked at my hand, then back up at my face. "What are you talking about, mistress? A new contract? More vengeance? Speak plainly." I met his golden gaze, my smile turning into a triumphant, challenging grin. "I offer you my hand in marriage," I declared. "You are bound to me forever, with no possibility of release, and I am immortal. Therefore, let us govern together. Take my hand and rule the world at my side." The most powerful, sadistic, breathtaking demon in the lower planes stared at the small, immortal hand offered to him, his gold eyes wide with comical confusion. He let out a short, incredulous chuckle, assuming I was joking. He rose, took my hand with exaggerated formality, and bowed deeply, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. "Ah, a proposal. Very funny, my lady. I accept your jokingly offered hand in eternal matrimonial bliss, for the sheer audacity of it, of course." He straightened up, still chuckling, and paused, finally registering the absolute seriousness in my expression. His laughter died in his throat. His golden eyes snapped wide. He looked from my resolute face to the iron grip he had on my hand, and finally, the full, crushing weight of his eternal servitude under a new, very literal title settled over him. Azazel's perfect, beautiful, and eternally damned face turned slowly, brilliantly dumbfounded. "Wait, what?"
If you enjoyed this quick escape, hit the subscribe button for new stories twice a week. Until then, I'll see you at the next flip of the pages.